Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and I am here today to talk about the sun's time in Taurus. The sun, together with Mercury, enters Taurus on April 19th and will be there until May 20th. In this video, I will talk about the main things that we can expect from the sun's time in Taurus based on the transits of the planets while we're in Taurus season. So I will just jump right in. So we always want to kind of orient ourselves, know where we are. We're on the very last couple days of the first quarter of the lunar month. So we had a new moon on April 11th, an Aries new moon, and we are coming up to that first square, and that first square brings us into the bright hemicycle of the moon, which means things happen outwardly. So I would expect the first couple weeks to be, especially the first week of Taurus season, to have a lot of action. We are also coming off of a Mercury cazimi with the sun. So what does that mean? Well, that happened this evening. I'm recording this on Sunday the 18th. Mercury together with the sun at 29 degrees of Aries, so in the very kind of last breath of Aries, are coming together and kind of providing us the insights of what we have learned so far during our time in Aries. And it's been quite an Aries season. There's been a lot of dynamic action taken, a lot of impulse to action. But if you follow me on Instagram, we've kind of been discussing, it's also been a fairly painful Aries season, it feels like, for a bunch of people. So I was joking that Aries season was just Chiron season because we have Chiron in Aries right now, and we will for the next half a decade or so. And it just seemed like this one in particular was hitting people's wounds. And sometimes Chiron will do that. It brings the medicine, but it also brings the wound. So there's been, I just feel like a lot of painful kind of realizations about really our relationships. And I think part of that, maybe the truth of our relationships, how honest we can be in them or not, what they're really feeding or not, the compromises that we have to make for the health of our relationships, the truths that we have to tell and the truths that we can't tell. And I think a lot of that has been, Venus had her cazimi with the sun in the beginning of, at the very beginning of Aries season. And so we kind of had this coming together of our values and our desires with the sun, with our purpose and with what we're trying to do, all in Aries, though, in this sign that's really about us needing to take action for us. But besides that cazimi, Venus was in a really difficult position. She's under the beams of the sun, so she's so close to the sun, basically we don't have easy access to her. And then she was in Aries, which is a sign of her detriment, so she's not, she's not quite as happy, quite as Venusian in that sign. And then she built up to a square with Pluto, which was perfected on the Aries new moon, which really kind of provided us with some catastrophic insights into our relationships and the power dynamics in them. We may have panicked, we may have said some things we didn't mean, we might have felt like there were power struggles, but we were really just making them. They weren't necessarily coming from the other person. So a tough Venus in Aries season with hopefully some powerful insights, and hopefully Sunday the 18th, the last day of Aries season, that cazimi with the Sun and Mercury kind of rounds those out and brings those home, and they land, and we're not left entering into Taurus season with too many loose ends. Yeah, that's kind of my hope for us. Because Taurus season is very different from Aries season. And part of the reason is that very quickly in the first week of Taurus season, and this even started in the last week of Aries season when Venus went into Taurus on April 14th. So she kind of grounded it. And now Venus is quite happy in Taurus. So it's almost like the host of Taurus season was off doing battle, and then she came home and was able to take a bath and get everything in order before the Sun and Mercury joined her on Monday the 19th. So already we're having this kind of grounding energy right off the bat. And then we'll also have Mars that's been in a very frenetic sign of Gemini since very early March, will enter Cancer in the first week of Taurus season. So we've got this major shift from air and fire into earth and water. So things are going to slow down. Now, the thing about them slowing down is that we might feel the impact of all the changes that were made during Aries season. So, yeah, it's a good time at the very beginning when we've got the Sun cazimi to Mercury to kind of gather those insights so that we can move forward in understanding what happened. The Mercury cazimi with the Sun also means we are halfway in between retrogrades, in between Mercury retrogrades. Mercury's moving super, super fast. So Mercury will get all the way through Taurus and into Gemini before Gemini season starts. And then we'll go retrograde. I've been over a few of these. The main Taurus season storylines, right? We've got that from air and fire to earth and water. We're also going to have all of those three players, Venus, Mercury, the Sun, and then the Moon. But this happens every month with the Moon. As they enter Taurus, they will approach a conjunction with Uranus. So they'll kind of build up this rebellious vibe inside of them, and then it will release, and then they'll kind of run smack into a wall with a square with Saturn in Aquarius. This is kind of a continuation and also a preview. We had our first Saturn-Uranus square in February, and we will have the second one in June, and then the third exact one is not until December. But so we've kind of, right, in February in Aquarius season, we had everybody conjoin Saturn and then square Uranus. And now we're having the Taurus version of that. So they're conjoining Uranus and squaring Saturn. They're feeling that urge to rebellion, and then they're running into the practical truths of Saturn, which may be experienced as oppressive or as goading, I think. We also have Jupiter enter Pisces, and so that's a big deal. Jupiter spends about 13 months in each sign, and this is still Jupiter's Aquarius year, but Jupiter is going to have an extended stay in Pisces from May 13th until July 28th. We've had Jupiter for the last couple of years in Saturn's signs, so a little bit more restricted. In Pisces, Jupiter is in his own sign, and so we get hopefully a really nice Jupiterian balm for everyone that kind of restores our faith that there is some method in the madness. We've got some interesting lunations. There's kind of a gnarly Scorpio full moon, square to Saturn, conjunct Uranus. So again, kind of right in the crosshairs of this Saturn-Uranus square that's so definitional for 2021. And then we have a cerebral, kind of inspired Taurus new moon on May 11th, which I think, if we don't burn all of our bridges at that Scorpio full moon, the Taurus new moon is going to be a lot gentler. By the time we get to the Taurus new moon, we have both Venus and Mercury in Gemini, and so there's this real kind of Gemini creative genius bent to the Taurus new moon. Also, the Taurus new moon is sextiling Neptune, so I'll get more into that in my videos that I do for the full moons and the new moons, which you can find a couple days before those happen on my YouTube channel. So yeah, I get in depth into what we can see in the charts and kind of the opportunities and the trickiness that they offer us. Okay, I'm going to go through the transits one by one, and we'll kind of be building upon these stories. So I've kind of given you the skeleton, and now we're going to put flesh on the bones. So the very last day of that first quarter moon, we have the sun into Taurus, Mercury into Taurus, and then we are going to have a first quarter moon, which brings us into the second quarter of the lunar month, the week that goes from the first quarter until the full moon, where things kind of gather inertia, gather speed, and ripen into a full moon, which that can also mean the tension builds, and we'll start seeing kind of, where we're feeling for the fault line for this full moon. So on the 22nd, we have Venus conjoining Uranus. So remember, okay, here's our first flashpoint. Venus, she's kind of running for the exit. She wants to change things up. She wants things to be exciting with Uranus. There's this real kind of rebellion against the status quo. She's pent up, right? We've all been under lockdown. We've been practicing social distancing. We've been feeling the pressures of all of this confinement. And so finally, we've got spring, depending on where you are. Spring is happening more or less. And so there's this kind of impulse to action. And so there can be a lot of energy, especially when we're in the waxing half of the lunar cycle, to kind of break out of our shells, right? And so we're going to wait. We'll see a couple days later, she's going to square Saturn, and that's going to kind of bring things back down to earth. But this feeling of rebellion bursts forth when she conjoins Uranus on the 22nd. Then on the 23rd, so Friday the 23rd, we have Mars enter Cancer. This is a bit of a struggle. Mars is in its fall in Cancer. It's really hard, right? Mars thrives. If we think about the signs that Mars rules, Scorpio and Aries, Mars thrives in its ability to make distinctions between things and its willingness to separate things. Which also can mean us separating from obligations, from the status quo, our willingness to go alone and take action. Cancer doesn't like to go alone. Cancer is going to be really sensitive to the emotions of others. And so our impulses to action they're a little bit more tangled in the weeds. You can really get into the weeds with Mars and Cancer in this way. Sometimes it shows up in this really codependent emotional manipulation because we can't ask for things directly. Right? Part of Cancer's Cancer symbol is the crab, and crabs don't walk forward on straight lines. They kind of scuttle sideways. And so there's this really, this way that Mars that functions really well doing Marsy things when it can be direct, is going to struggle being indirect in Cancer. And so we have Mars in Cancer, I think, until June 11th. So things can just get a little bit hairy because people are not, Mars goes into Leo on June 11th. Things can be a little bit hairy because people are not being direct. And with the Scorpio full moon, and Mars in sensitive Cancer, there's really people, this full moon that we're building up to has a real potential to hurt your feelings or to have you hurting other people's feelings. So there's a lot of feels in this full moon, and this is part of why. The moon is in its fall in Scorpio, ruled by Mars, and we will have Mars in its fall in Cancer. So they're kind of struggling together. On the 24th, Mercury conjoins Uranus. So Mercury, right, our scintillating mind, will come together with the game changer, Uranus, and offer some insight, right, into a very, very innovative solution to what we are currently spending our time worrying about. Simultaneously, Venus will square Saturn, and our values and what we desire will come up against what we feel is possible, what the world's, what worldly limitations say yes or no to. And we will respond either by doubling down or by having to compromise. We were talking about these squares happening in fixed signs, Taurus and Aquarius. They do not like to compromise, neither of them. I should know, I have a parent who's an Aquarius and another one who's a Taurus, and they did not like to compromise, and their marriage ended. And yet, both Aquarius and Taurus, their commonality is that they're both trying to create a stable world. Taurus may be focusing on the material aspects of it, while Aquarius focuses more on the theoretical, broad-reaching social aspects of it. But at the same time, right, I think what's important is that they really are on the same team. Aquarius is just going to say, we need to totally change our social welfare program because it's not working, and this is the utopia, and this is how it's going to work for everyone. And Taurus is going to say, great, but you have to still feed people on your way there. Taurus is going to say, like, I can't just not eat for 7 years while you build your utopia, Aquarius. And Aquarius will say, well, if we go at your pace, we'll never get there. They're both right. They're both right. And so that's kind of how they pull at each other. And that's how it's going to pull on you, probably, right? The kind of Aquarian vision of how everything could be, and the Taurus reality of your body has to come too, right? It matters that you have your material needs met on your way to utopia. The next day, on the Sunday, the 25th, we have Mercury square to Saturn. So, right, Venus had kind of 2 days in between them. Mercury just goes boom, boom from Uranus to Saturn, right? This is what we're going to do. It's going to be great. Here's the plan. Blah, 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 blah. And then smack into Saturn. Oh, this has to work for everyone. It can't just work for me. Okay, what are we going to do? How do we do this? Okay. And I think the important thing is that Saturn offers us the opportunity to make lasting change. So, right, we may experience these squares as kind of like a downer to our exuberance. But Saturn is really saying, in order for things to last, we need to do them in a certain way. And that is actually a supportive contribution, though it may feel oppressive when we're wrestling with it. We also have Mercury conjoin Venus. They come together, our ability to connect our vision, what we create with our words, what we do with our minds, to our values. Mercury can speak to our needs, what we need in connection. This is a great time to communicate about your relationship, not your 10-year plan about your relationship and how it's going right now. What you need to feel connected and safe and at home with each other. Mercury in Taurus is taciturn, is not going to have tons and tons and tons of words, is going to be thinking in simple ways about what we actually need. The kind of downside of Mercury in Taurus is that it's going to be really hard to change its mind. But the communication of simple truths is going to be about what we can handle. And, right, sometimes we think these things are so obvious, and they're actually not. They're not obvious to our partners. They're not obvious to the people around us. So speaking in those simple sentences is good. We have the Scorpio full moon, dun, 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 on Monday, the 26th. Again, I won't go too much into that, besides to say it is a full moon with both the sun and the moon in a square to Saturn, so encountering those harsh edges, and then the sun conjunct Uranus, and nearly conjunct Uranus, and the moon opposite Uranus. So Uranus is right in there. So we've got just a lot of tension, a lot of flashpoints on this full moon, ruled by Mars in his fall. The day after, we have Pluto station retrograde. Pluto is an outer planet. It's not a huge deal for it to be retrograde. Pluto is retrograde over 40% of the time. What will happen is that Pluto slows down, and so it's spending a long time at 26 degrees of Capricorn. It's going to retrograde back to 24 degrees. So those very ending, those kind of 24 to 26 degrees of any of the cardinal signs are just getting an extended play with Pluto. And then it might be interesting to note if you have kind of Plutonian dynamics arise, which can just be, the sense that things are maybe more intense than they should be. In December, Venus will station retrograde conjunct Pluto at 26 degrees. So we will revisit these degrees in a really profound way, in a way that's just being previewed now. We have Mercury sextile Neptune, which is just, it's gentle, it's inspirational, right? That Mercury sextile Neptune will be these kind of moments of insight and inspiration that will really kind of yank on again as Mercury goes through Gemini and squares Neptune, challenges the Piscean dream to dance in the world of ideas in language. It's trying to language that. But while it's in Taurus, right, it's intuitions in the body. The 30th, the sun conjoins Uranus. So this, I think, we'll see. I think we will feel Venus conjoining Uranus as finally like, let me out. I just want to take off this mask and hug people. Mercury conjoining Uranus of like, I know what to do. Suddenly I know how to find my way there. If we're going to make a hard left betting on this Uranus, I bet it will come closer to the sun. This kind of sense of power and purpose that wants to stay steady inside of us. Coming into contact with the game changer of like, you know what, this is not working. This is not working. I need to take a different tack. And on the last day of April, that will peak. So these last 10 days of April, there's a lot of stuff that happens. The first bit of Taurus is a lot. So pace yourself. Taurus is good at pacing itself. Taurus is slow and steady, wins the race. So it could be very exciting, but don't burn yourself out because we still have, another 3 weeks of Taurus season after this. So on May 2nd, we have Mercury trine to Pluto and Venus sextile Neptune. I think this is just a really kind of soulful day that we get. Of these personal planets, both coming into contact with these outer planets, lending them kind of depth and connection to something way beyond us. And then we have a third quarter moon and we enter the fourth quarter of the lunar month. And so we're dipping down towards the new moon. And so I think that will be some really welcome respite after the busyness of the first 2 weeks of Taurus season. It's our Scorpio full moon. So the moon comes into a waning square to the sun on Monday the 3rd. Mercury is just zipping through Taurus. So we had Mercury in Taurus for 2 weeks. Now Mercury's in Gemini. Mercury goes into Gemini on the 3rd, right after it comes into a square with Jupiter that's at the very end of Aquarius. So that square to Jupiter, it's kind of these like closing arguments with Taurus, right? So we had a big Mercury aspect on the last day of Aries season with it in a cazimi to the sun when it is, and then it's going to leave Taurus with a square to Jupiter, and Jupiter just kind of blows Mercury's mind. So it's almost like Mercury in Taurus suddenly confronts like just how big Aquarius is, how big it can see, but it's almost too late for it to do anything about it because it is going to It's going home to Gemini, where Mercury is so much more dexterous, nimble, flexible in thinking, but it's a shapeshifter. And so ideas will move very quickly and minds can get changed very, very quickly as well. The sun's going to square to Saturn. So, right, that is going to be that grounding pull back towards, wait a second. We can't just do this Uranian thing. That is going to be, right, if you did make that hard left, on the 3rd is when you are going to come into the consequences with come into contact with the consequences of having made that choice. And that brings you back down to earth a little bit. Saturn is the brakes and Uranus is the jetpack. So I guess when you put the brakes on a jetpack, you just fall out of the sky. Should have thought that metaphor through before I said it. Then we get a nice few quiet days. Venus trines Pluto on the 6th, which I didn't include because, I don't know, I just don't think it's a huge deal. We might be just feeling the bigness of everything, feeling the intensity of everything that's going on, because I think it will be intense. We have on the 8th, Venus making a square to Jupiter, and then, right, so Jupiter is at the very, very end of Aquarius. Venus is going to square Jupiter. That's going to be generally a positive thing. A square between our two benefics, Venus and Jupiter, is really kind of, I don't think that's going to be challenging to anyone. And then Venus goes into Gemini. So Venus is leaving her home sign, but she's going into Gemini, where she is quite fun, quite playful. The host of Gemini is Mercury. Mercury's in his home sign. It's I almost feel like, they're going to, Venus and Gemini reminds me a lot of the board game Settlers of Catan. Right? It's kind of a very Taurus Gemini. It's all about managing resources, but it's about kind of the social connections and the trading and the luck of the dice. And Venus and Gemini loves those board games. So, right? And she's quite flirty. So we go from a Venus that is quite sensual to one that is a little bit more cerebral. Very verbal as well. Love is a conversation with Venus and Gemini. We have the 10th. Mercury is going to conjoin the North Node. And when planets conjoin the North Node, they almost get larger than life. So I think there will be lots and lots of conversations happening with Mercury on the North Node. That's going to be, I mean, there may be so many words that they cease to have meaning. Mercury on the North Node. Luckily, it'll be really it's in the balsamic phase of the moon, the day before the new moon. And so everyone's going to be tired. And so, that kind of the fatigue of the lunar month may actually help you not go too crazy in your brain like you could with Mercury conjoining the North Node in Gemini. Then we have a Taurus new moon. Like I said, this Taurus new moon hosts, Venus rules both the sun and the moon in a Taurus new moon, and she is in Gemini, ruled by Mercury in Gemini. It's a very cerebral space. The new moon happens at 21 degrees of Taurus, which sextiles Neptune. That is right around there at 22 degrees of Pisces. And so that Neptune gives it kind of this dreamy feel. And the ruler in this very cerebral sign makes it very, very creative. So if there was a new moon to start a creative project, this would be a great one. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that, and there'll be an extended video. Mercury is going to trine Saturn the day after, and I really like this because we had Mercury, right, have that contact with Uranus, get really inspired, run into Saturn, get a little bit disappointed maybe. And now with this trine, they're both in air signs, they're kind of back on the table. Saturn can be like, okay, here's the lay of the land, these are the problems that we have. And Mercury in Gemini is, the mastermind at finding a way around those problems, at designing genius solutions to them. So I think this is really, we'll have the renewal of the new moon, we'll be out of that gnarly Scorpio full moon. And this will really be the moment where we go from maybe being bogged down or feeling lost to really committing to and getting solution focused with what we're trying to do, and not resisting Saturn so much, but really being able to receive those gifts as really the limitations that make creativity possible. And then the next day we get Jupiter into Pisces. Jupiter rules 2 signs, Sagittarius and Pisces. In Sagittarius, I see Jupiter as kind of the master teacher of belief and philosophy and the things that we integrate consciously. In Pisces, I see Jupiter as the buoyancy of faith, the sense of that there is an order to the chaos that supports you and lifts you up. I think Jupiter in Pisces will hopefully be the rising tide that lifts everyone's little boat. It's just going to dip its toes into Pisces. It only gets to about into 2 degrees of Pisces, but it is going to be there for 2.5 months. So from May 13th till July 28th, we'll have Jupiter in Pisces, and hopefully that's going to lend a sense of hopefulness, and a restoration of faith in the goodness of the world, in the support of the world, in your tiny human project. I think that will be really sweet. And so we'll get kind of a concentrated view of that. And then that will also be a preview into a more extended transit of Pisces that Jupiter will make in 2022. Jupiter goes back into Pisces right around the new year, and will spend much more time in Pisces in 2022. A few days later, we have the Sun trine Saturn. So just as we had Mercury trine Saturn, we have, I misspoke. That's not the Sun trine Saturn. That couldn't be. We have the Sun trine Pluto. We can get a little bit inflated with the Sun trine to Pluto. So the Sun is in Taurus, trining Pluto in Capricorn. The Sun's ruler, Venus, is going to conjoin the North Node. So we can experience a real inflation of Venusian things, right? And so there's really the danger of hubris right around here. This is, kind of the hubris that's going to go before the fall with the Sun trining Pluto, thinking that it's kind of larger than life, and Venus really getting carried away in the Gemini dream. thinking that it knows what's going on in a way that's creating factions, that is putting the sun, the kind of the project, at risk. Then we actually enter the second quarter before the sun goes into Gemini, so we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the structure of the lunar month with respect to the sun. And the last thing that happens is Venus trines Saturn. So again, beautiful. Everything that happened a week before with Mercury trine to Saturn, kind of really integrating that, being able to use the gifts of Saturn, being able to understand how the structure supports the whole. It doesn't, it's not purely limiting. Here we've got our values coming into harmony with Saturn. You've got Venus in the grassroots organizer in Gemini, connecting with the Saturnian, Aquarian broad view of what could be. And they're playing together really, really well. So I think that's a really sweet close to the sun's time in Taurus. And the next day, the sun goes into Gemini, and boy, is Gemini packed. Gemini season is really, I think, in terms of some big transits, eclipse season, a Mercury retrograde, it is kind of a layer cake of crazy. Potentially. So that's definitely the month of 2021 that I'm most holding my breath about, although I won't be able to hold my breath forever. So come back in a month and I will talk you through Gemini season. If you made it to this part of the video, thank you so much. Please like this video, share it if you enjoyed it. Let me know how it sinks in. Let me know the transits that you're feeling. You can do all of that in the comments. If you want some help untangling all of these things in your own chart, you can head to my website at starheartastrology.com and book a reading with me. I also have some super fun events going on in the next month, so stay tuned for those. I hope you have a transformative Taurus season.